German lawmakers say Chinese threats to Taiwan are unacceptable. Visiting the island, they drew a parallel to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, saying in Europe we've been experiencing a big neighbour invading a small one and trying to impose its will with military force. So what do the German parliamentarians hope to achieve? DW's chief international editor Richard Walker put that question to one of them, Steffen, from the ruling Green Party.
Yeah, it's important to attach to the partnership we have for many years, and in those times it's absolutely important to show we are friends in these times, and we stick to the cooperation we have on many topics: democracy, health, IT business. Those topics are important, and it's important to show our friendship to Taiwan.
Now, China is bitterly opposed to this sort of visit. We saw how angry they got when a very prominent American politician, Nancy Pelosi, was there just recently. What do you say to the Chinese who are going to be opposed to your visit too?
Taiwan is a democracy, and it's important for us to be in contact, to have cooperation with other democracies, and we think we can learn a lot from Taiwan. For example, the COVID policy is quite different to Germany, and it's quite successful. And it's important to find out what the difference is. It's important to learn about the enhancement of democracy. And I think there is something to learn from Germany. And of course, there are often topics that Taiwan looks at Germany. Me, for example, I have been to Taiwan some years ago when they wanted to establish some lay justice system, and I could tell about Germany, and in these times they have a lay justice system which is quite close to the German system, and so it's important to have this cooperation, and I think China should not interfere in this cooperation, because we strengthen democracies in Germany and in Taiwan with this cooperation.
And yet the Chinese side say that you are doing exactly that, interfering in China's internal affairs and breaching Germany's own one China policy. Do you see your visit as being in line with Germany's one China policy? Are you committed to this policy of one China that does not recognize Taiwan as independent?
It's important that we have this cooperation for many years already. And it's established that not the president of the Bundestag is going to Taiwan, and not members of government, but it's an established cooperation that we have this exchange of members of parliament, and so it's no breach of the policy we have for many years. It would be a change if we would hesitate visiting Taiwan in these times. And that would be an important negative sign for Taiwan if we wouldn't go there anymore in these times where China is threatening Taiwan.
The war in Ukraine is being seen by many in Taiwan, but also around the world, as a kind of wake-up call for Taiwan that something similar could happen with the Chinese invasion. Do you see Ukraine as a wake-up call for Taiwan? Do you think that Ukraine carries lessons for the world in approaching Taiwan?
I think it's an important comparison, because Ukraine was a threat for Russia, because Ukraine has a very common history with Russia, and it showed that it's possible to have an open democracy even if you have a history like the Ukraine. And that's the same with Taiwan. Taiwan shows for people in China that it's possible to have an open democracy, and it's not just a Western thing to have a democracy like that. And so it's of course an interesting lesson to learn, and I think it's also an example that many Western democracies strengthen the democracy in Ukraine, and so they do with Taiwan. That's the hope we have with this visit.
Our very own Richard Walker there, speaking with German MP Steffen. Let's get the perspective from Taiwan. DW Correspondent William Yang is in Taipei. William, talk there of support for Taiwan and strengthening democratic cooperation. What does Taiwan want?
So for Taipei, ever since the controversial visit of the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in August, and then the subsequent Chinese military exercise around Taiwan, Taipei basically wants this tradition to be continued. So we have already seen a French delegation that visited last month, and then after this German delegation visiting, there are continued visits from different countries, a foreign delegation, including the UK, Canada, and Denmark. And for Taipei, they know that these publicity plays a very important role in terms of holding China accountable and also sending a very strong signal to Beijing that Taiwan is not alone in this fight, and there are more and more international recognition and attention being put and paid to the aggressive moves that Beijing have been displaying across the Taiwan Strait over the last few months.
And Taiwan is important to Germany on an economic basis for trade, also for learning lessons like we heard there from the pandemic. But what would Taiwan then like in return from Germany?
I think one of the key and top issue for Taiwan, based on my conversation with lawmakers here and also experts here, they think that it's strengthening the bilateral trade ties, and they are hoping that maybe some kind of discussion can be started through this delegation visit by the potentially exploring the possibility of establishing the bilateral trade agreement. Of course, that is a years of steps that will have to be taken. But some of the experts even suggest that if Germany was able to actually take that first step with Taiwan, it could even become the reference point for future EU-Taiwan bilateral trade agreement, which the European Parliament has actually been bringing this up over the last few months.
What about the delivery of something like arms?
I think for Taiwan, the current government is very practical about the possibility of that. But essentially, because the U.S. has that Taiwan Relations Act that requires the U.S. to play that role, but there is no such law that exists in Germany. And so I think the expectation of an actual arms supply right now, currently from Germany, is not of the top priority. But for Taiwan, the most important thing is for Berlin to actually continue to engage with Taiwan at all levels and with a very public statements and public engagement, and at the same time having more substantial engagement and exchanges like the trade deals and trade relationships, because they know that once the supply chain between Taiwan and Germany was established, it could potentially play an important role to get into the consideration in terms of how Germany calculates its relationship with China, or how Germany positions itself in the Indo-Pacific region.
And does Taiwan worry that any German support could be held hostage to its relationship with China?
I'm sure that's also definitely part of the consideration and calculation for Taipei when it comes to how deep and how it wants to really draft and position itself when it comes to engaging with Germany, because it's widely known that the German economy relies heavily on China and the Chinese market. But with the new government that came in last year, there is also sign that Berlin is taking a little bit of a new pivot towards its approach in China and towards the Indo-Pacific. So I think Taipei is holding on to the hope that the new government in Germany is going to focus a little bit more on the value-based diplomacy, which then is going to be able to play into the benefits of Taiwan when it comes to the highlight of human rights and democracy. We've already seen that being highlighted and brought up in the conversation between the Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen and the visiting delegation this morning over here in Taipei.
William Yang in Taipei.